The other ones, there's enough, A, there's enough people here, and B, it's gonna be easy. The guy just had to substantiate an easement.
Yeah, that was the Madison Road. This one.
And
I don't know this one. This is the Madison Road. 2302.
what's that?
This property is on Norwood Road.
Okay, I have 7:01. We'll call the meeting of the North Smithfield Planning, Zoning Board to order, January 24th. Roll call, please.
Mr. Najarian,
Here.
Mr. Martin,
Here.
Mr. DeZio,
Here.
Mr. Marcantonio, Mr. Marston,
Here.
Ms. Benoit. Here.
Okay, thank you. One moment. What's that? Yeah, I got it. It's just like we have cramped quarters and a lot of papers, so. Every time we need to ask a question, we go through a pile of stuff to elbow our neighbor. Item 3, disclosure of no compensation or pension credits received by board members. We all serve on voluntarily at the invitation of the town council. Item 4, disclosure and notice. Zoning Board of Review members shall disclose any ex parte communications about any contested or material adjudicatory facts or opinions concerning the merits of any application before the Zoning Board of Review. Item 5 is the approval of the modified or amended minutes from December 13th. At the previous meeting, we continued it, and it probably didn't need to, but you had all received the original minutes, and then the secretary, Tiffany had sent to everyone the proposed amendment. So all had a chance to review. All it is are just minutes, but they reflect the addition requested by a member. So if there's any other issues, I'll accept a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve the revised minutes of
You want-
December 13th.
You want the second?
I'll take a second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item 6 on the agenda is the approval of the decision for Manuela Garza, AP Lot 06, AP 06 Lot 91, Norwood Road. That was ZBR 2302. That was distributed today. It's pretty straightforward. I read through it. I didn't see, there are no issues. I'm assuming everybody had a chance to give it a quick read. Unless there are any requested revisions or clarifications, I'll take a motion to accept.
I'll make a motion to accept the decision of Manuel Garza for 91, Lot 91 Norwood Road, ZBR application 23-02.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
We have a second, Mr. Marcantonio. We might as well do a roll call for the voters, the members who voted, please.
Mr. Najarian? Yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. DeZio?
Yes.
Mr. Marcantonio?
Yes.
Ms. Benoit.
We didn't have her here. That was Gail. Gail's listed on the decision. So we
Well,
only
we have
need,
the
we
four,
only
though.
need the 4. So we approved it. I'll sign that at the end.
Yes. And Mr. Chairman? Yes. There were also minutes for January 10th to be approved. Was that included in that motion?
Nope,
Okay.
I missed that one. I do remember receiving it. We had the minutes sent for the January 10th meeting, which was our last meeting. Again, if members had any requested revisions or...
Yeah, I recall
Clarifications.
sending Tiffany a very quick email that at the top, that you just needed to change the date. That was really it. It was kind of administerial.
Yeah, I saw that, and I'm sure she made that correction.
Yes.
With that being said, do we have a motion to accept and approve the minutes from January 10th?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of January 10th, 2023.
A second? We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, so apologize for that. So the next item on the agenda is Storage Rentals of America. Oh, excuse me. Oh, jeez. Skipped over that. Okay. Elections for new officers. We have 3, chairman, vice chairman, secretary. So I don't think it matters, but we usually go chair, vice chair, secretary. So I'll take nominations for a chairman.
I'll make a nomination for Robert Nazarian.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. I accept. Any other nominations for chair? Hearing none, can I have a motion to close nominations for chair?
I'll make a motion to close nominations for chair.
Second?
Okay.
We need to close, so we have a second to
Second.
close?
So, a second.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, I didn't see
That's
it.
all.
All right, we should have a roll call vote. So it's Robert Najarian for chairman. We might as well do each one as a roll call.
Sure. Mr. Najarian?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. DeZiel?
Yes.
Mr. Mark Antonio?
Yes?
Mr. Marston?
Yes.
Ms. Benoit?
Thank you very much. I look forward to working with all of you again for another productive year. Now we'll entertain nominations for vice chair. I would like to nominate Mr. Martin, Scott Martin, again. I don't know if you're inclined to do it again.
My term expires this year in November, so, you know, I'd like to see someone else take that, possible.
Do we have other members that are inclined? I believe only voting members can serve on the executive. Is that true? Yes, okay.
So is he declining
Yes.
to serve?
He's declining. Well, I mean, he didn't say no outright, but his preference is no.
You wanna do it?
So it's up to the 3 of you.
Well, they're both pointing
have
at
to-
me.
So we have to, we'll go through that one, or do we just do a second nomination for someone else?
No, we need a nomination because you've,
Okay.
you've essentially
I'll nominate
declined.
Chris DeZiel.
I'll second that.
Chris, do you accept?
Yes, I'll
Okay.
accept.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair?
I'll make a motion to close the vice
Hearing
chair.
none, we'll have a motion. Motion made, seconded?
I'll second it.
Was seconded. Okay, we have a roll call vote for the election of Christopher DeZiel as the vice chair.
Mr. Najarian?
Yes?
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. DeZiel?
Yes.
Mr. Mark Antonio? Mr. Marston?
Yes.
Ms. Benoit?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Secretary, it's a little bit ambiguous as to what the secretary truly does, but nonetheless, we do need a member to do that. We have a nomination for Mr. Martin.
No, Mr. Martin.
Marson, Mr. Marson.
Oh, Mike, oh, I'm sorry. Mike, will you
We
accept?
can't hear Vinnie with a mask.
Yes, indeed, but he's protecting himself,
Yes,
that's
I'll-
fine.
I'll accept.
Okay, wonderful. Mike will accept. Do we have any other nominations for secretary?
I'll make a motion to close secretary.
Motion's made, seconded.
I'll second it.
I second.
Okay, nominations are closed. Let's have a roll call vote for Mr. Marston for secretary.
Mr. Najarian?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. DeZiel?
Yes.
Mr. Mark Antonio?
Yes?
Mr. Marston?
Yes.
Ms. Benoit?
Mike, we can talk to the staff to see exactly what your what your role
Get caught.
normally is. Yes, yes. It's an important role, but then again, it's a little bit
Yes.
undefined, so. Well, thank you all. We look forward to another successful year. We have a good group. We always have a good group, so we'll just keep doing what we've done in the past. So now, we can continue. Item 8 on the agenda is ZBR 22-06 was continued to this date certain from its first appearance. We've been told by the applicant through communication to the office that they want to continue to a date certain of 2/28. And that, as you all may recall, they were a little bit deficient or very deficient in their the information they provided for compliance with the watershed overlay special use permit requirements. And I believe they're still working to get us the necessary submittals. So they've asked for a date certain of 2/28. There was no reason for them to attend. They did that through their lawyer. So can we have a motion to continue ZBR 2206 Storage Rentals of America to a date certain of 2/28/23?
I'll make a motion to move application ZBR 2206 to a date certain of 2/28.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that's done. We'll see them on the 28th. The 8B is ZBR 2205 Island Solar. This is a continuation of their previous appearance, so and you are?
My name is Katie Otrondo, and I'm here to represent the applicant relative to this application. So as I stated, I am here to represent the applicant for this application relating to property located at 850 Iron Mine Hill Road.
We have to add that.
I have with me Greg Rogowski, who is from TRC Companies, the project engineer, and he can answer any technical questions for this property. There are 2 lots. Number 850 fronts on Iron Mine Hill Road, AP 16, Lot 18, owned by Joseph and Sandra Offier. And the applicant will lease the access to a landlocked lot behind number 850, which is designated AP 16, Lot 19.
So if I could, should I clarify, are you counsel?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I thought as much. Just to clarify, what I need to do also, we can do it when you finish, but we need to submit into evidence the revised application, correct?
Correct.
You submitted a revised application, so when we're ready, when you finish briefly, we'll enter that as P1A, since P1 existed, but now it's been withdrawn.
Amended.
And the other submissions remain. I don't need to re-enter those. So
Correct.
why don't we, I think in the interest of the members, since we did discuss this to some length, maybe what we can do is go right to your P1A, which is the application. Because I think all members have a clear memory of the extensive presentation that had been made.
I was absent, I didn't attend that meeting.
Okay, well then, you're not eligible to vote, but you certainly can participate. But we have enough voting members to continue. The reason I'm doing this is because there's some not ambiguities, but some unique. This is one of the first applications we've ever had where we have, it's like a laundry list of à la carte requests for relief, which wasn't a function of necessarily the applicant's doing, but if we could, I'll do it now, and you might as well stay there because we're going to engage you, but
Okay.
we'll introduce the new application, which is ZBR 23-04. It's dated 1/24/23, We're gonna call that, it's for today's date, I'm sorry. It's for the meeting date of today, 1/24/23. And we'll call that P1A, because it will substitute and replace P1, which was from the meeting date of 12/13/22. All of the other submittals remain unchanged, so they'll stay on the record. So when we look at page, the nuts and the bolts of this are in that, if you will, pardon the laundry list of requests on page 11. So it might be helpful if we just, previous council, we had talked about this, and so 5.7.5, the 100-foot setback, which is 5.7.5, yeah. We were advised by council at the first presentation that the planning board had suggested or almost preferred this to occur because of the topography of the property, and it facilitated the installation of the solar array. Is that accurate?
My understanding is that that would be accurate, correct?
Okay. And then 5.7.5G, we can come back to this because there's some discussion to be had there with regard to, you're proposing that the property lines that are secluded from other occupied or developed land has the natural buffer from the pictures that were presented, and you're asking not to install an additional buffer because there's already a natural buffer.
Correct.
All right, so we'll come back to that. But for item K, 5.7.5K, I had noted this, and I think members agreed at the time, that within the ordinance, it says that if National Grid or the utility requires in writing that there be a variation from the written requirement, and that appears to be what's happening, is that National Grid has put in writing that they're requiring above-ground equipment. That's what I believe was stated, so the question would be, if in fact you provide the written documentation, why do we need to grant relief?
This says if required, it doesn't say it is required. The word is if.
Well, it's required by the utility.
No, it says here, if required by the utility provider.
Yeah, if.
Okay.
Yeah,
And in this
National
case, it
Grid,
does.
we were advised by the, during the first presentation, that National Grid is going to require above ground, or a diversion from the ordinance, which is allowed, as long as it's required. So if that is in fact the case, then why do we need to grant relief?
Well, we added that variance as out of an abundance of caution, just because we viewed the ordinance as a little bit unclear. So it's really just out of an abundance of caution, as I stated.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I believe also in talking with your other counsel today, that was at the direction of our planning board and our planning board chairman, out of an abundance of caution, so that there would be no issues.
Oh, I understand, I recall, but I also am I was a little perplexed as to, we have an awful lot of abundance being applied to this one application, and I wasn't quite certain why. We've never had such a provision or such a request made, and it seems moot. If the utility is going to submit in writing the requirement, and the ordinance provides for that, then what are we granting?
I follow your logic. If the utility is gonna require it, it makes what we have in our ordinance moot, but the planning board planner, our town planner, Mr. Carullo, suggested that out of abundance of caution, am I correct, Larry?
Yes.
Out of, yeah, that it be put in so the applicant filed both as a safety measure. And for what it's worth, the applicant agrees with you, but they put it in there under an abundance of caution so there could be no issues.
With that being said and understood, I think by all of us, does the board not have the right to disregard or respectfully defer on that recommendation? Or do we have to
Well-
grant it, or do we deny it because it was requested?
I don't think it would be a denial. I think it would be if you find out of your analysis, after a weighing of all the facts, that relief is unnecessary and you can still grant the ultimate project without that relief based upon the fact that the utility company is considering that they're going to do it and it would be moot for you, you reach the same point. So I would suggest to you that you certainly could.
What I was gonna suggest, Mr. Archambault, is that, right, that simply, we have in our statement of facts that the utility provider is requiring it, and therefore it's not necessary.
Yeah, and for what it's
Chris,
worth,
You have to
Mr.
speak into the mic.
And for what it's worth, Mr. DeZiel, that's exactly the opinion of the applicant and their legal counsel. But they didn't want to come in front of you with the planning board, with the town planner suggesting it, and then not have that relief and you don't know what you're going to say, and you turn around and say, oh, wait a minute, the town planner's requiring it, we're going to bring everything to a halt. So it was done out of an abundance of caution. But to answer you, yes, if you choose to disregard that based upon a clear reading of 5.7.5 subsection G, and the fact that there's prior testimony on the record before you that the utility company is going to move in that direction anyways, I'd suggest you certainly could.
So I would suggest that after we discuss this and deliberate, if we're all of the same mind, we can include it in the motion if we choose to indicate that no action is required, but we acknowledge the fact that the issue was raised. So we'll leave that for our debate. Similar logic applies to 6.2. 6.2 is not in the solar ordinance, it's a separate ordinance. And I can open it up. Mr. Martin, would you mind? It's the same thing, and again, I think we all recall the term abundance of caution, but categorically, is there a new building provided for in the application? I don't believe there is. This is a solar installation, correct?
Correct, there are no buildings being constructed.
And can you shed any light other than, quote, the abundance of caution as to why the planning board would want, and if we did, what relief are we granting if there is no building?
Let me just step in for a second. Again, Mr. Chairman, I think what the town planner was looking at was the word structures. He wasn't looking at building. He knows there's no building there, but again, out of an abundance of caution, he was saying structures. So if the project itself is gonna be defined as a structure, why don't you put this relief in? Again, it's the planning board, and they're making recommendations to you, but you have the authority underneath the zoning ordinance and the relief that's requested to decide whether you have enough to grant the applicant's relief. I think the analysis you all just gave 3 minutes ago was spot on, and I think the applicant agrees with you.
Because also further, both words are used in the ordinance. It starts off with the word every building, and the second sentence says all structures.
Structures.
Well, but also under that logic, you would have to have this as a required element in every application.
Well, that's what's most, not disturbing, but is most noticeable, is that they seem to have been going to almost extraordinary measures to qualify this application, and I'm at a loss as to why we're granting relief to a nuance, and it seems to be a nuance, an interpretation of the word building versus structure. And I don't know if you can define solar arrays. I think you'd have a great debate defining a solar array as a structure.
I'm not going there,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
I mean, you could, if you write a dissertation on it, but, so I think my suggestion to
Sense of
members is that we
motion.
handle this the same way, and we deliberate, and if we find that in our better judgment, 6.2 is really not relevant, we'll note it in the decision and act accordingly. If you can go
And,
also to 3.
excuse me, Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
could just add to that.
Go ahead.
You may find that no variance is required. However, otherwise, if you do deny the variance, if it does end up being needed, it would amount to the loss of all beneficial use of the property. So that's another reason why we are requesting that.
Say that again?
If this variance were to be denied, it would amount to the loss of all beneficial use of the property and would amount to a regulatory taking. And the hardship is the character and quality of the landlocked property, so
Which-
that's why
which
we
if-
are.
If what was denied?
The variance that we were just discussing under 6.2.
6.2?
Yes, correct.
But again, I think if we are to move in that direction, we have two choices tonight. We either issue five variances and go through 5 dissertations of the hierarchy of the rules and regs, or the board chooses to, in writing, acknowledge that whichever ones they choose, 6.2, et cetera, that they have reviewed the request and find there is no reason to grant. So it's not going to be a denial, it would be an acceptance of the fact that we received it, we reviewed it, and we saw no action needed to be taken. So that would not be considered a denial.
Okay, noted.
We'll make sure we word it, I'll check with council and you as well, to make sure that if we do submit such a motion, that both councils agree that it's legal and lawful. So in that light, 3.13, required in connection with any building. I'm confused. Again, was this abundance, are we somehow linking lot 18 to this? Because I don't understand, again, unless the planner made it extremely specific as to what was intended by the requirement. What relief are you requesting from 3.13?
So we requested this relief because we believe the planner interprets this provision as requiring relief because we are accessing the lot from the Othier property and includes this, again, out of an abundance of caution. We are not actually using any of the Othier property to count as front, side, or rear yards. And in fact, we're seeking dimensional relief as we described for the 100-foot setback requirement, nor are we proposing to use parking or loading on the Othier property. We are asking for this relief to respect the cautious interpretation of the town planner, again.
So for the board's benefit, you kind of acknowledge the fact that this 3.13 is tied to lot 18 and the fact that there's a structure, house and a shed or garage, whatever that is.
Correct.
But the ordinance, no part of a yard or other open space or off-street parking or loading required in connection with any building for the purposes of complying with this ordinance shall be included as part of a yard, open space, or off-street parking similarly required for any other building. There is no building on lot 19, so that's, all I'm saying is what are we granting relief from? A blanket statement, which is 3.13? I don't quite get, I'm not being argumentative, I'm trying to understand.
It's circular, the whole, and your logic brings it fully around, it's circular. And by what you just said, the suggestion of the town planner respectfully seems to be a moot point. You don't need the relief because you're dealing with 5.7.5 and what's required there. But again, the applicant just put it in out of an abundance of caution. When the town planner tells you that you should request this relief, if you were to ignore that, you may find yourself in front of the board getting a denial, or I don't think we need to overanalyze it. I think you've done a great job analyzing it, but I think it's based upon the relief that's already been stated that the applicant will be required to get from the utility company. It's a moot point.
So again, if we choose not to issue relief on these items, we will not note it as denial. We will note it otherwise, okay?
Understood, thank you.
Now, also, on page 9, 7B, so we know, as I did discuss this with our council and our zoning official, we have lot 18 and we have lot 19. I think we all know by reading the zoning ordinance that the arrays require a vacant lot, but lot 19 is the vacant lot, and there are no panels proposed for 18. So 18 is being used primarily as frontage or access to Iron Mine?
I'm sorry, could you please repeat where you were looking?
Well, application page 9, I wrote it in my notes, let me see.
9, 7B, go to
Yeah.
page 9, go all the way down the bottom, 7B, where it says
Yeah.
Lot 18, single-family dwelling, and then
Lots
Lot 19
is
vacant.
So I guess what I also wanted to clarify,
The panels are on 19.
yeah, all the panels are on 19, and that's a vacant lot. 18 is included as part of the development, and it has a dwelling, but it has no array proposed.
That's right.
So we did clarify, I asked council to clarify that our interpretation, or your council's interpretation of the ordinance was correct, in that since there are no arrays on 19, you are compliant. But then I guess I don't think we ever got to this last time, when that is, what is the interrelationship? Because there's 2 applicants listed on the application, correct? You have the.
This is the easement.
Yeah, so is
19.
this an easement, the road that's proposed, that goes from 19 to the street? That goes on the Lot 18's property?
Yes,
Excuse me,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that lot is used as an easement for ingress and egress to 19, which is the vacant lot. I think what we discussed earlier, and what's the most important thing to note here, is under 5.7.5 subsection B, which requires that there be a vacant lot for the development of a solar array. They have the vacant lot in 19.
Yep.
And then you'll see on C, which is beneath it, that you can subdivide a lot. So the town has a policy that if you have a lot and you can create a vacant lot by a subdivision, they'll allow that, so that you, in the end, if you comply with the 6 acres minimum, the fencing around it and all, which this applicant has, it's okay to have a second lot. Here, it's, the second lot in 18 is owned by a separate party, and they believe there's gonna be a fee agreement for ingress and egress and an easement, so it's a win-win financially for all the parties involved.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add?
Go
I
ahead.
know that we can't bring past other applications into this, but we had the exact same situation on that King property over on Pound Hill Road, where there was a residence on the front, and they came across underneath the swamp, and then came airborne on that property with an easement to get the power out.
Yep.
So this is, from what I can see, it's very similar to that, right? Other than, this is all above ground, that was partly on the ground, partly above ground.
And just to clarify, the applicant and the owner are both listed as Island Solar on the application, correct? It says applicant Island Solar LLC, owner Island Solar LLC.
For both properties?
Well, on the application, on P1A, which is what was just submitted, and on the previous one, applicant says Island Solar, owner says Island Solar. I don't see any reference to 19, and I don't know if we need any reference, but I'm just clarifying. So the owner of the property on 19 is not part of this, they're just granting you access
Correct,
through their property to the street?
correct.
And is it also correct that they're, 18, yeah, 18 is granting 19, okay. If you could just identify yourself, sir?
Greg Rudowski with TRC Company, ESS Group. I've worked on the design plans with Jason Bolt.
Okay, did you get all that, Tiffany? Sorry.
Greg Rudowski with ESS Group / TRC.
And does yeah, I'll have you come up in a minute, but is it also, I can't tell, but it looked to me when I analyzed it, that the driveway for 18 interacts and is shared in part with that road from 19? Okay, all right. And for the benefit of members, because not every access road, historically with our solar developments, most of them are in undeveloped area. So sometimes the access road does not need to be paved as long as it's accessible to the service vehicles. In this instance, because you have an abutting property, what is proposed to be the construction, if you could come up and just identify yourself and indicate that your testimony will be truthful and accurate.
My name, Greg Rogowski. I can testify that my statements will be truthful and accurate.
Thank you. So just to clarify, what is the construction of that access road? Is it going to be paved, or is it gravel?
No, it's
or-
gravel. It's a 20-foot wide gravel road.
Is that pre-existing part of it?
You could say about the north-south portion will be new, and then the portion that runs east-west is the existing driveway. So
And
we'll
that-
be resurfacing the portion of the driveway where we interact. It'll be widened a little bit.
Okay, for the owner of 18 to access their property freely?
Well, the widening is mostly for our heavier construction vehicles that will need to access the site, for maintenance and for construction, obviously, but yes, obviously, they will also benefit from the widened driveway.
And I guess, just for our clarification, is this in fact an easement, or is it just a right-of-way, or how is that legally? It's just in general information, it's not a...
It's an easement.
It is an
Easement,
easement?
yes,
Okay, all right,
correct.
Good. Okay.
So I just have one question. Is the driveway also being widened not only for your vehicles, but to meet the requirement for any service vehicles that may have to go on the property?
Yes, there's been an analysis done on the orientation of the road vertically, horizontally, to make sure it can handle any construction traffic or any vehicles that may need it in the future. There's also a turnaround at the bottom with, just outside the gate, so we've done the analysis to make sure that a fire truck can get down there and turn around and get back out.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Do you have a further presentation? I had kind of circumvented you.
Well, for the record, I would just like to say we were here last month. We put on a full presentation, as you've already acknowledged, for the relief requested in this application, including the special use permit and variances. And we are incorporating by reference that presentation that you heard at last month's meeting
Okay.
for tonight.
Okay. Again, we can entertain, are there specific questions for either council or the professionals that are present? Okay. With that being said, we can, I guess we can take, we'll ask for the public, so we're good with you. Do we have any members of the public that are present and want to speak on behalf of this application? Yes, sir, if you could come forward again to the podium.
My name is Donald Croto. We're in a butter.
Or you need to just give your address so that she can write it down.
752 Iron Mine Hill Road. Our property abuts 800 feet of that property. And after the last meeting, there were several things that we weren't aware of, so that I like to bring up. One that we heard now that the solar panels will be up to 15 feet in the air. So, saying that if they have to put the all-season green buffer in, those trees aren't gonna be more than 4 or 5 feet maximum. It'd take forever for them to ever block out those solar panels. And also it shows where, they're not planning on doing anything as far as putting any trees abutting our property on that old 800. And actually, their variance goes through, they'll be picking up another 100 feet because it's gonna put them right up to the other property that's in front of it. So it would be even over 800 feet. So that's one issue. Again, in the variance is showing that they're not gonna put any barriers on our side at all.
I thought that, I'll call the engineer back up at the time, but just one moment, but I thought we had extensive conversations about this at the first meeting, that is in fact what they were going to do, that they were going to specifically buffer your elevation. I even asked that you speak with the other gentleman who was here, I don't believe it was you, another gentleman, and that he review with you what had been resubmitted to the planning board when you went back after the appeal. So I was under the impression that you were going to go to great pains to alleviate this gentleman, the abutter's concerns about visual impact. So I'm a little bit confused. Elevation, honestly, of the solar panels, we don't really have jurisdiction unless they are doing something other than what the ordinance says. If the ordinance gives a specific height of an array not to exceed, then they must come to us if they propose a difference. But if they're compliant with the ordinance, we have no basis by which we can tell them to do something else. So our primary concern at the last meeting was to know that the applicant and the planning board, because again, as we had noted, they have to go back to the planning board multiple times now before, even if they get the relief they've requested from this board, they still have to go to the planning board on probably multiple meetings, which is also going to give you the opportunity to further ask for clarification if there's something you don't understand about what they're proposing. And as far as that movement uphill, you know, we're kind of, we've been told a sworn testimony by the applicant that the planning board specifically requested them or suggested that they do this. So, you know, that's where we're at, trying to navigate through all of this. And so is your issue still, did you have any conversations with any of their professionals?
No.
Okay. If you could step aside just for a moment.
Sure.
If you could come up again, we need to address this and find out what the applicant is doing to address this gentleman, the abutter's concerns as to the visual impact.
There was a figure shown at the last meeting that may be more helpful, but basically, when we're looking at the plans there, I believe the plans that you have should have a...
What sheet would
on
that
sheet,
be?
C2, that's sheet 7 of 16.
And we don't have it electronically, do we?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
We can...
If anybody has, Scott can open it up, yeah. Just give us 1 second so we can open it up.
At the meeting in December, I believe it was agreed that,
That corner was gonna get.
it was agreed that you would get with the abutter and walk the property. Why didn't that happen?
Well, I believe what we had done in the meantime from the meeting, we walked the site with, you know, I believe with the planning
this
board
gentleman?
and with the abutter. I wasn't there present, but I believe my
Okay.
colleague was present for this meeting. And we have added a landscape screen on the north, and it wraps around the other side of the access road in sort of an L-shaped pattern. And the L-shaped pattern ends specifically where the direction of this gentleman's, you know, residence is. And I think the zoning board, you know, in my opinion, is right on the money in their statements of that's gonna be something that's gonna be detailed out in the planning board. It's not something that I think is, you know, appropriate for this venue. But,
So we're looking at,
but we're-
just if you could, sir,
Yeah.
we're looking at C2. If you don't mind, actually, could you just walk over here for a moment? We'll explain what you're noting. Sir, you can come, please, if you'd like.
Guys, mind if I just-
Yes, you know, we can have, make sure everybody can see.
Yeah.
So why don't you just give us, thank you. Why don't you just show us exactly,
Sure, so this also is the existing conditions plan. It's actually the radius map that we use to create the abutters list. But, this gentleman, this property, you know, he has this long yard. I believe his residence is back in this corner.
that would be
just
here
off
on this drawing?
So where I'm trying to show is get us in reference to this corner of the property line, which is here.
Here, okay.
Right here. See, the property line goes across. It's kind of on top of our limited
So it's
disturbance.
the northernmost
So,
part of
if you're looking at
19.
this property where this L shape comes around.
Yep.
You know, this is purposefully cut at an angle that would obscure the view of the solar array from its residence.
Because the array is here, and this is the road,
Correct.
and what is this, the planting?
This is a landscape screen.
Okay,
So this
oh,
is a
that-
landscape screen. We've added some additional, there's some additional notes
Yep.
that go with this landscape screen on the other side of the plan. They don't really give any specifics, but you know, during the planning board, you know, phase, we have a a lot of good graphics folks that do a lot of good visual simulations, and that'll all be thought out.
And the fencing, is this the fencing here?
The fencing's on the inside, so the fencing is
Oh,
on the
there it is
inside
there.
here,
There's
so
the
there's
fencing
gates,
there.
the gates down in here.
And this is gonna have, does this have a privacy? This is only 7 feet, right?
7 feet tall.
Okay.
You know, believe the array is set up higher in grade than the residence and the property. I think there's a little bit of a grade drop, as it comes up in grade from south to north. And in this case, the privacy slats don't really make sense because they're interior to the landscape screen.
Yep.
I mean, we have done projects like that in the past where we have done some of the vinyl green or
Yeah.
black privacy slats.
And your conversation with the planning board to define the landscape screen, this gentleman's concern is that if, you know, if you plant a baby plantings as opposed to mature plantings, and I guess the other question is, so his property is at an elevation that's higher than the array?
Lower.
His property is an elevation that's lower than the array. So what is your line of sight from your bedroom or your second floor, for example?
Well, I can see the house that's over here.
Yep.
I can see their house.
So you can see the house, I have to say it so people understand. You can see the house on lot 18. Okay. And,
It's not like I can see the whole house clear, but I,
okay, and this topography drops off. This is where the hill is, where the 100-foot setback? So if you pushed it downhill to comply with the 100-foot, does that magnify his circumstance or alleviate?
It's hard to say, you know, just on a.
I was misunderstanding you. I thought your elevation was higher so that you would have a view of the panels.
Yeah, you can see some spot shots in here. That's a 457. This is getting down into a 437. So even between, you know, roughly here and here, you have about a 20-foot ridge.
Drop.
Drop down
Yeah.
low side.
Okay.
Low, you know, everything.
What do you,
comes
they do
smooth.
push it, he's still gonna be sitting on top of that hill, right? Because even if you push this down southerly, right?
Correct.
You're still gonna be on top of that hill.
There is a lot of effort put into this design as far as keeping away from a lot of those steep boulder areas. There's some really large boulders in that area that, you know, I think was one of the main reasons that once we walked the site with the planner, he recommended that we shift it up just so we could
Not disturb that.
not disturb that area, and also there's an access issue, right? If you try to, you know, get heavy equipment down some of those steep slopes and back into those boulders, it can become really problematic. And
How high would the foliage have to be to obscure his view?
it would be based on visual simulation and where, you know, where exactly his property is in relation to the grades. I can't say exactly at this point in time, but that analysis would be part of.
And sir, what is your primary concern, given that this array is lower in elevation than if you stood in your yard? What is your, because we have
He's
to be,
low.
we
He's
have,
low. This is high.
he's lower.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he said the opposite. I
No, he's
asked-
lower. Yeah,
You're lower?
yeah.
Oh, I thought I heard you say you're higher, looking down. So you're looking uphill.
right.
So when you're on your second floor, for example, you're level with this, or you don't know because you're just looking at dirt now?
Probably fairly close, I guess.
Well, what is your, you know, the problem is you can't just categorically say, I don't like it, therefore, zoning board, you must say no. We have our standards that we must apply. But we're always trying to be respectful to everyone who comes in front of us and always for abutters. So we thought that we had the opportunity. So what is your primary concern at this point specifically?
Well, one large one that came up at the last meeting that actually you brought up, it's gonna devaluate my property.
Well, that's a subjective opinion. We really can't, that's something we can entertain, but it's a very subjective opinion. That can be argued 100 ways to Sunday. So is there you had mentioned that
The size of the
the
street.
issue was the plantings. Have you, so now you did not meet? I thought, so was there any effort made to get both of you together? Okay.
I mean, another thing is, I mean, we have a road that runs right alongside our boundary lines.
Yep.
It runs all the way out of past the 800 feet. It's been there forever. They used to mine granite out of there, and we use that road all the time. I mean, love walking in the woods. The kids, my grandkids, ride their bikes and all that, you know.
Yeah, but nothing from this is gonna preclude you, that's your property.
Right, but that's looking at a solar farm. It's sitting right there.
Yeah, but you're gonna have fencing, you're gonna have, is there natural vegetation in this area?
Existing tree line is up, you can see the tree line in here.
Yeah, and what about here?
Yes, this is all,
Okay.
this is all woods.
So I mean, at some point, there has to be a reasonable expectation that, I mean, this is also residential property, so you could just as easily be building houses there.
I don't see a house there.
No, I understand, but that's, they do have the right within reason, so, okay. So, from
Mr.
the
Chair-
board's perspective, yes.
Mr. Chairman, may I, the applicant's amended application, page 11, the very top, one of the prongs of relief they're asking for is 5.75G. The solar photovoltaic system must be set back a minimum of 100 feet. You've discussed that. All season green buffer must be planted within. If you turn to our zoning ordinance under G, and you read it strictly, and the light most beneficial to this abutter, this gentleman, visual buffer and setback, all components in the photovoltaic system shall be set back from the property minimum of 100 feet. The applicant is going to comply with that. The green buffer shall be composed of evergreen vegetation, shall be composed. The green buffer shall completely obscure the solar photovoltaic system
That's what I wanted
and
to check.
fencing from all neighborhood properties. The green buffer shall be planted with mature plants, trees, such that the buffer is complete upon proposed startup of the solar photovoltaic system. The permission to operate, and it says occupancy, shall not be issued until the green buffer system is complete. The town has thought this out well in its policy, which is clearly specified in the ordinance. The applicant knows this. They asked for this prong of relief. I think you hear in testimony that you know you have to go back before the planning board. You know you have to comply with this. So my suggestion would be to assuage the concerns of the abutter who lives there, knowing that the applicant's asking for this relief, you make any approval contingent upon this subpart of the ordinance, 5.7.5G. The greenery is, and you can even read that subsection into the ordinance. So that the solar farm's gonna have to spend a little bit extra money to make sure that this greenery that's planted isn't, you know, a 2-foot arborvitae. Maybe it's an 8 or 10-foot arborvitae, but whatever it's gonna take to comply with this part of the ordinance. And then if you do that, you're gonna take in the maximum steps you can under the ordinance. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does, and I think the other thing that we could do is, we could qualify the variance if we did grant part of the relief for G, that it not be granted on the side of the property that's common to this gentleman's property. That's the only thing we can do to help you in this regard, and as counsel has said, the word "shall" in legal terms is quite emphatic. There is no ambiguity to the word "shall."
It's
So
designed to
you would be
protect you.
protected in that way. The economic issue, you know, you can, that's a subject of debate. So that's, we can't dwell on that because it's a moving target. There's not a lot you can say either way. So that's the best we can do.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
could chime in, please.
Okay.
So with regards to 5.75G, we require this relief from this provision due to the site constraints themselves. The parcel is secluded, it's within a heavily wooded area, and it's buffered such that visibility is limited. In order to meet this requirement, the applicant would have to remove vegetation in order to plant new vegetation and hundreds of feet of wooded area buffer the surrounded properties. It would be very extensive. And where there is potential visibility from abutting residences, the applicant proposes an evergreen buffer along the boundaries of lots 18 and 19, as well as 85 feet of landscaping along the boundaries of lots 18 and 58, which will provide adequate screening to both neighbors to the north and the northeast. I could just state that for the record. And as far as devaluation of the property, respectfully, this is not a standard for granting a special use permit in the zoning ordinance. It appears to have been mistakenly included in the application. However, there's no competent evidence on the record that there will be any devaluation of property values. In fact, this development is screened from the street and abutting property such that it will not be visible, in our opinion.
Okay, thank you, but I think we can still, you all set,
Sir, could I just ask you what your address is on Iron Mine Hill Road in case 752. Thank you.
You can sit, please. Oh, you do? Okay, hold on one moment. All right, counsel, are you done?
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Okay, if you can continue, just be as brief as you can.
Something that you brought up about the,
Speak into the mic,
oh, sorry,
please.
something that was brought up about the National Grid stating that they have to put poles above ground. I dealt with National Grid for over 30 years. Before I retired a few years ago, I was the director of plant operations for Landmark Medical Center and the Rehab Hospital of Rhode Island here in North Smithfield. And I worked with them quite extensively. Never, ever did they mandate that we had to put poles up. They preferred everything underground. And if you look everywhere in town, you'll see where it's all, everything's underground, not above ground.
Well, just, sir, just so you understand, I'll read it specifically from subsection K. Electrical transformers for utility interconnections may be above ground if required by the utility provider.
Correct.
It doesn't make
Not
any
poles.
reference to poles.
Well, that's what they're saying, that they told that they have to put poles in.
No, it doesn't matter what they said. The ordinance, the only provision that we would make is one that already exists, which means it says very clearly here, electrical transformers for utility interconnections may be above ground if required by the utility provider. So if they provide writing from National Grid that says that that's what they want, then they don't need to come to us because the provision is already there. There's no reference in this ordinance about poles.
Well, that's what they were saying. They wanted the poles put in, not put the lines on the ground.
Yeah, but that's not, we have no jurisdiction with regard to poles. You could, there's every reason why you couldn't go to the planning board with your background in that world of power and your access. You can make the argument that you want them to tell you why they can't bring it underground from Iron Mine. That's the planning board's
Okay.
purview. And if you have that expertise as part of your profession, then you can speak to that and have them engage you. You know already that it's far more expensive to go underground that distance than to go above.
Absolutely.
But you have the right, by all means. But we don't have the authority.
Okay, no, I understand.
Because we're only required by what this says,
Right.
okay? But you should pursue that, because that's in your best interest if that's your concern.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
so they're asking for relief from that, correct?
They're asking for relief, but then they're stating that the utility company has already told them that they want it, so therefore it's in the ordinance. So the question was, why are we granting relief?
My question is, has any documentation been produced by National Grid stating that it in fact needs to go above ground?
Other than in their application, I don't believe we have a physical document stating such, but it is written in their application, correct? It's here somewhere. Yeah, we do. What is that? I think that's, yeah, that's way down in the, yeah, it's P12. So P12 is what is being referenced. Is there a specific page where it says that? Executive summary, where is it on there? So you're indicating, well, your counsel, you're indicating, for the record, that P12 clearly states, and it's a National Grid document, that your transformers are to be above grade or above ground?
These are the requirements that National Grid has.
Okay. Okay. So if you've submitted it, then you've submitted it. So that answers that question. So, okay, thank you, counsel. You're all set, sir? Okay. Okay. We can leave it open unless we have, do we have any specific, excuse me, Ms. Enright, did you see, she referenced P12 from National Grid? Well, I guess we can read it specifically, but can one member read P12, page 5? Yeah, and, system modifications,
That's one of the ones.
System modifications, which number are you looking at? 1, 2, 3, or 4?
I think the whole thing, that's the system modification.
yeah, the entire thing.
Yes, correct.
Rebuild the circuit, feed,
Do you want,
remove,
do you want the
install,
entire thing read?
install, no, I think we're just trying to find where they indicate, but again, I don't know if we're chasing our tail insofar as they have to submit it to you, and it's either gonna be categorically stated or it's not.
Well, on the.
So if it isn't, then they would have to come back for the variance, right?
On
They're
the-
saying that it is, and therefore it's a moot point. What, am I missing something?
I'm kind of only asking the question because they're asking for relief, but there's really been no official statement stating that it has to be above ground. But yet our ordinance says only if the utility company states it has to be. So I just don't want to have confusion where you give relief for something that it's not because the company's saying it has to go above ground, it's because it might be cost effective to keep it above ground. So
Well, again, that's why that's why my opinion was inclined to not grant the relief, because we don't have anything to grant relief from. And if the power company does provide you with categoric statement that is compliant with the ordinance, then we don't need to be involved. That was my premise from the beginning. I don't think any member wants to grant relief for something that may or could happen, so.
The document has National Grid stamped on the top left corner, so I'm assuming it came from National Grid.
Correct, it did.
And in item number 4, they talk about installing a new mid-span pole number 54-50, as well as further down, it states to tree wire from proposed pole number 5450 to new poles number 54 through 51 through 54 to 53 alongside customer access road. And the poles will be 50 feet apart, so it will be above ground.
Well, the ordinance speaks to transformers, not to poles. So I think we can leave this be. We have kind of flushed this out to the extent that I think members are clear on whether or not we want to grant relief, or we see it as an issue that's not necessary, that doesn't require action on our part. So we can discuss that during deliberations, okay? Council, do you have anything further to add?
I would just like to add that with regards to the abutters' concerns, the applicant is more than happy to continue working with them and will continue to do so to address their concerns.
Yeah, and our only power is to ensure, as council had highlighted, that item subsection G, which is the visual buffer and setback, that we need to give that serious consideration before granting relief and determine whether or not we want to qualify that relief to certain elevations on the property. Because if we give you the relief, then you're just going to rely on whatever is there. So, again, we have to enforce what we believe to be in the best interests of all parties, so we'll take that under consideration. Okay, anything else? Anything further?
No.
Okay, thank you. I can leave it open if you want, or are we good to start deliberation? Do we need any other?
Close the public, asking the public.
I think I will, but I think that was the only gentleman. But are we good with the ayes for both at the same time? But do we have any further questions for the applicant?
I do not.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. Do we have any other members of the public that wish to speak on this application? Oh, okay, hearing none. So I think we are fair that we could close both. You can make 2 motions or make 1.
I'll make a motion to close the public comment section.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then
No.
we need the second
I'll make a
motion.
motion to close the applicant.
I'll second.
His,
Any objections?
yeah, I got a few.
Hold on.
questions.
What do you want, Danny?
I mean, for us.
Well, hold on. No,
During
that's,
deliberations?
Yeah, and do.
no,
we got a
that's-
we got a
gotta-
motion on
we
the
I'll
gotta-
second
yeah.
that motion.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we'll go into deliberation. Vinnie, when you speak, you're gonna have to take the mask off, and you can just speak
No, I'm
into the
not
mic.
taking the
but-
mask off.
So before you speak, hold on, wait. So first, I think I mean, I have my notes like I normally do, and I think we have to, we can keep it open in a broad sense for now, but then soon we're gonna have to gravitate and determine which ones of this subsection that we're going to feel that we need to rule on, and which ones we're going to address and put aside as marked no action required. If all of you can just, if you go to page 11 of P1A, you know, so you have in front of you what they're asking for. And of course, remember, we've got two issues here. We've got the standard, the special use permit that's fundamental to this ordinance, and then we've got the the variances that are being requested. Council, because they're not linked, or do we consider these linked so we'll hear them together?
I was writing some notes to grab my thoughts. Would you repeat what you just asked me?
Do we consider them linked, the variance and the special use permit, such that we want to hear them together, or
Yeah,
can
we
they
usually-
stand alone?
We usually go in the order that without the special use permit, you can't get the variance, right? Isn't that how and so.
Correct, so,
Why don't you, we typically follow that format procedurally.
yeah,
I would
so
suggest-
we'll entertain the special use permit first,
Thank you.
and then go to the variances. But it's also noted, I forget the subsection, that if they're linked, if one can't occur without the other. But I think it's clear that even if all the variances were denied, the solar array could be built. Because otherwise, we have to hear them together, right?
That's a tough question to answer in the abstract. In a hypothetical, it would seem like it could, but I would say for this particular applicant, no. And I would consider the special use permit first, and then I would move on to the variance. You agree with me, Mr. Enright?
Sure.
Yeah, I just didn't want to, I just wanted to just confirm that, because they're close to being linked, but I don't think they're completely linked, because we have so much ambiguity with regard to the laundry list of variances, so.
I understand.
Okay, so why don't we, with that being said, we'll do the special use permit first. So members, why don't we, the issues we'll discuss are relevant to the special use permit standards, not the variance, okay? So the first one is ingress and egress to property and proposed structures thereon with particular reference to fire or catastrophe. You have your book, I just want to, oh, can you have your book? Mike, open your book to 9.2. I just want to make sure that when I'm reading this form, it's exactly what the actual verbiage is. Sometimes there've been some variations. No, you can just check it for me. When I'm reading it, go to 9.2 for special use permit standards. And if I read here, if it doesn't agree with you, just tell me. So item 1 is ingress and egress to property and proposed structures thereon with particular reference to fire or catastrophe. My notes indicate that the drawing included in P10, which I believe is the master site plan, clearly, and we've discussed it, clearly shows the approach road to the array for service vehicles and emergency vehicles. We can request, we always do this, but it ends up being a moot point because they have to approve it anyway. We can always ask for PD and fire approval of the proposed access road for their vehicles as a condition of the SUP if necessary. But again, most often than not, it's even within the ordinance, I believe, that those things have to be approved. So
The only
we can
piece I
do
would
that.
add is the applicant testified that that road was designed to allow a fire truck to be able to turn around at the end of it, so.
Yeah, yeah. And that would be, again, part of the planning board and fire review. Item 2, off-street parking and loading areas where required with particular attention to the items in 1 above, which we just read, and the economic noise, glare, or odor effects of the special use permit on adjoining properties and properties generally in the district. Again, this is simple in one respect, but very complex in the other, depending on how you want to entertain it. My notes indicate that the access road provides for access. No vehicle parking is normally part of any proposed array, nor is loading once construction is completed. Always, every application we've ever had always indicates that the service vehicle may come once, 6 weeks or by a randomly or a predictable schedule, but not very frequently, to service the panels. We know from everything that we've ever done in this regard is that there's no odor, and the glare, I believe the panels are all going in the opposite direction, southerly. Yeah, so that opposite of any occupied dwellings that we know of. The noise question, again, I believe that's addressed in in P6.
Yes.
And of course, the ordinance also has clear rules and regs, which is part of their submission to get the permit in the first place on the building side of the equation. The economic word is always kind of a potpourri of anything you want to throw in there. So it's ambiguous in many respects, but there wouldn't appear to be any economic impact on the adjoining properties that can be quantified and proven. P7, again, this is a little bit a part of the issue of the abutting property. P7 indicates a new plan for landscaping along the abutting residential property designed to mitigate the impact of the array. The lack of a buffer, as we know, was noted in the original denial by the planning board, master plan approval denial. One of the things that they referenced was they were, quote, disturbed by the lack of buffering that was on the northern exposures. They specifically noted in both the new and the second new application that, and one of the P documents they indicate when they described the difference when they were introducing themselves to the planning board for the second time, they indicated very clearly that the application differs substantially because they have in fact now planned to provide that buffer. So that's that one.
Is it 100-foot buffer?
No, meaning the buffer, this buffer here on that northern elevation. The 100-foot buffer, that's part of the variance, so we'll talk about that afterwards. Item 3, refuse and service areas with particular reference to the items in 1 and 2. As we know, refuse and service is typically minimal, if at all, for these installations. The utility requirements, again, as we noted, are clearly noted in the ordinance, and they've already provided some paperwork, even though they don't have to prove it to us, they have to prove it to the building department. Item 4 was the screening and buffering with reference to type, dimensions, and character. We've heard testimony from the abutter. I think we were all a little bit confused as to why there didn't appear to be communication, which we had asked there to be, between the abutter and the applicant to try to do everything they could to satisfy this gentleman's concerns. But we also know, as noted, that council reminded us that 5.7.5G very specifically notes and uses the word shall on multiple occasions. So that is linked to this because it's part of the variance request, but it's so that we're kind of, tied together here. But I think that 4, for the SUP requirement, is addressed by P7, which is that document that was addressed to the planning board, which again notes additional landscape buffering along the residential exposure. 5, signs, if any, proposed exterior lighting with reference to glare, safety, traffic. economic impact as it relates to those items and compatibility and harmony with properties in the district. 5.7 has very clear provisions for signage and lighting and restrictions thereby. So I don't think, we haven't been asked for any variances from that. And we know that lighting is usually minimal just at the main gate where entrance for fire and police. And signage is usually restricted to safety for first responders and for the power grid to make sure that everybody knows what they're dealing with for any voltage issues. Item 6, required yards and other open space. It's kind of an ambiguous thing, but 5.7 does list all of those sub-requirements. And again, any variation would be in the form of a variance, so not part of the SUP. Item 7, general compatibility with adjacent properties and other property in the district. I think we historically find this issue not just with SUPs for solar, but sometimes with SUPs in general, that they're not always typically compatible with adjacent properties. That's usually why they require the special use permit, especially in residential districts. But that's why the ordinance was written so thoroughly to provide for proper buffering of the array to make it more compatible so that it would almost not be visible. So that's what I have. Do we want to go back? And then members can add any further comments for item 1, the egress and the ingress? Is there any further comments? Okay. Item 2, the off-street parking and loading. Okay. Item 3 was the refuse and the service areas.
Yeah, you hit that.
Okay, we're good in that regard. Item 4 was the screening and buffering. Again, this is kind of linked to the variance, but I think there's enough information there for us to hang our hat on, if you will.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything, we're good? 5, signage and lighting and glare, again, as it relates to those things, signs. So that's a pretty standard fare for most of our.
Yep.
Item 6 was required yards and open space. And again, item 7 was the general compatibility with the adjacent properties and other property in the district. So hearing no other additions, we can entertain. Chris, would you need time to write it up, or?
Well, just with regard to the special use, I think that's pretty straightforward, isn't it, as far as the motion?
Correct, you just, yeah, it's just
Yeah,
gonna.
let me just
time
find
we're
the
finding it
application
fast.
so I can refer
Yeah.
to the application.
Yeah,
number
just
and-
list the application, and indicate,
Oh, duh. Okay, never mind.
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
just to let you know, you skipped over utilities with reference to locations, availability, and compatibility.
7?
Yeah, because it goes 1, 2, 3, and number 4 is actually utilities. You went to screening and buffering, I just want to make sure you,
oh, that's why I noted that, I thought I missed it, because I have it here in my notes, for some reason our form is not correct that I had. So utilities, requirements are included as part of 5.7. Oh, do you have your book?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it says utilities with reference to locations, availability, and compatibility.
Okay. And that's actually item 4? All right, so we gotta fix this form. I usually go to the book when I'm doing these, but this is what we have on file, and so it's incorrect. So 5 is screening, and the other ones continue down. So I did indirectly, thank you, Larry, my mistake, we gotta update this. And as we indicated, we do have that P12, which indicates that National Grid clearly has the ability to bring service to the property. So that's been achieved in that regard, so. Chris, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I make a motion to approve that part
Oh,
of,
hold on. That's what I asked. Do we have anything further?
Yeah, my concern,
You gotta, Vinny, you have to speak into the mic.
my concerns are the 100-foot.
No, those are variances. We're only talking about the special
Special
use
use.
permit.
Okay. What would this come under?
I can't see it.
Would this just come under special use?
But we cannot
Bring
do
it
that.
outside.
We cannot introduce outside
I'm not
information.
introducing anything, this is knowledge.
No, it doesn't matter. We can't introduce anything into the deliberations
Well, I'm
that
just
was
telling you
not
how I think.
presented.
You wanna listen how I think, fine.
Well, no, you can, but you just can't introduce that. You can't reference it on the record. You can give your opinion, but you can't introduce things from outside. It's just, we don't have that
And
legal
this is-
authority.
I won't believe, but a judge ruling is not on the out, it
You
affects
have-
everything we
Vinny,
do.
You gotta speak into the mic. They can't all hear you, so. But it doesn't matter if it's a judge or the district attorney or whatever. We can't bring outside information in to contradict or refute something that any applicant gives us. We know that that is the law, hard and fast. And if we do it, and we use that as a basis to say no, then
No,
the
I-
judge is going to tell us.
I can
that we're
use it
wrong.
as a basis to say anything.
You can, but again, you have to be very careful. I'll let counsel take it. I'm not going to play lawyer. That's not my
No,
job. You're free to speak, but you should not be referencing things that you bring in from the outside. You can give your personal opinion, but that's,
It's
and
not my-
however you achieve that is up
It's
to
not
you.
my personal opinion.
Yeah, but it has to be, because you can't bring outside references to this meeting. It's just not legal. No matter how passionate you may be, we would be in violation of the law.
Well,
And
I'm not passionate about it all, it's just a matter of fact.
But no, you're not understanding what I'm saying. We cannot do it. And that's just the simple truth. So you can give your opinion. Now, do you have anything to say with regard to the special use permit?
That's why I asked you, will this come under special use?
That's all we're talking about right now, just special use permit. Do you have something you want to add?
Well, this use from the, where was it? I had it right here. Okay. The special use permit was granted in Portsmouth on a solar farm, and it went to court, and the judge ruled you can't put a solar farm in residential area because it's manufacturing. I know Mr. Pimentel said that manufacturing is okay in these zones. And so I did a little bit of research, and
Yeah, but again, we don't have, your point may be 100%,
No,
and it
I'm
may
not
be
trying to-
something that has to be
I want to debate
changed.
this all night, but that's just where I'm going.
But we don't have the ability to define a solar array as manufacturing.
I don't, but
It doesn't matter. If our zoning table doesn't define it as manufacturing, and if the special use permit ordinance is not rewritten, it doesn't matter. Your point may be extremely valid, but that needs to go to the town council and the planning board to change the ordinance if what you're saying is correct. But as it pertains to this application, we cannot entertain that, even if you're steadfast and it's true.
It's
We
real.
don't have the legal authority to redefine the definition.
I'm
We
not.
just don't.
I'm not trying to redefine anything.
Well, you are. You're saying essentially that we should deny it because it's
I'm not trying-
manufacturing and therefore it's in
I'm not
violation.
telling anybody to deny anything, I'm just telling you where I'm coming from.
Yeah, but we can't, you can speak that way, but we can't entertain it because the ordinance and the use table does not define solar as manufacturing. If anyone in the town wants to petition the council to change that, you always have the right to do that. But until that's done, we have to go by what the law is. And the law does not say it's manufacturing. I don't know how many more times I can say it. It's just, am I correct, sir?
Mr. Chairman, you have the patience of an oyster. I mean it respectfully to Mr. Mark Antonio. I have admonished the board for years now, over a decade, not to bring in anything external for reference. The board is a quasi-judicial body. It must weigh the evidence that's put on in testimony before it in light of its ordinances, and that's it. And if you have any external conversations or emails or communications or research, it has to be disclosed right up front at the beginning of the meeting as a potential bias, and it shouldn't occur. And That's all I'm gonna say, and I don't wanna debate it. I don't wanna talk about it for another second. Now, I'm gonna be firm. Let's move on. Shouldn't be said. You did a fine job explaining it. We should move on. Thank you.
Okay, so without any further questions, do we have the motion ready for the special use
I
permit?
just need one house cleaning item, and that is, I'm looking at P1 and the notice and the agenda, and it references the application as ZBR 2205, but Exhibit P1A states that the application is ZBR 2304.
Okay, we can ask the zoning official to clarify.
So the applicant had submitted an application with the changes on it to clarify some of the original issues that they wanted to make sure that they corrected. So they decided to do a new application, and we also re-advertised the whole thing as such. So that's why we're bringing a new application. We changed the application number to make sure it was different, so it referenced a different number.
So three no longer exists?
One.
Or, no,
Oh, yeah, no.
2305, the previous one doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's what I'm confused about. How does the more recent one have a lower number than?
It's a
Oh.
different year. So if you look at it, it's
Oh.
23.
Gotcha. All right, I'm ready.
We're good, okay.
Okay. I make a motion that this board approve that part of the application of Islander Solar LLC, ZBR application 23-04, dated December 30th, 2022, requesting a special use permit to construct a solar photostatic system pursuant to section 5.7.
Is it December or is it January 24th?
No, where that is when the, that's the meeting date, or when it was signed.
Okay, gotcha, okay. Yep. I'll second the motion.
And again, just to clarify, we're in the new year, so the new rules apply as to the number of votes needed for, to pass a motion. So it's three, no matter how you define it. It's defined as a majority, but you can only start a meeting with 5 or 4, so therefore the majority is still 3, so. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Chairman, I just need clarification on who I'm calling. Is it the original members that were at the first
Correct,
hearing? Because
correct.
that's going into
Correct, yeah.
the evidence. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Mr. Najarian,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Antonio,
No.
Mr. Marston,
Yes.
Who else was present?
the fifth?
Oh, that's right.
Who was the fifth, though?
Gail was,
it was Gail.
yeah, okay.
Yes.
So we only need 4 and 3, so, so that motion passes. You agree? Okay, so that motion passes, that was 3-1?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the variances. Keep your page 11 open. I'll do it again, and then we can come back, or we can just interject as I read, we can go from there. We learned quite a bit, I think, and we have quite a bit to just, you don't need to overstate it, but there are some developments that occurred during the testimonies that we should pay attention to. So this 9.3.1A, that the hardship from which the applicant seeks relief is due to the unique characteristics of the subject land or structure and not to the general characteristics of the surrounding area, and is not due to a physical or economic disability of the applicant. And again, we'll kind of entertain these. This is for 5.7.5G, which is the 100-foot setback. Solar system must be set back a minute, yeah, okay.
I thought D was-
No, D is that.
100 foot.
So G, yeah, so D, we'll redefine it. D, correct. D is the one that deals with straight 100 foot.
And it's just the southern
Yeah.
border of the property?
The northern part.
The northern part?
Well, see, you know what's funny is D literally says, D.1, consistent with section 5.7.5G, visual buffer and setback. All solar arrays must be set a minimum of 100 feet from property line. So it's just kind of linking it to G, but not, so, but again, for D, we're kind of relying on the fact that the planning board with their expertise in this type of condition, which is, you know, land and topography and things of that nature, they felt that it was beneficial to move it to the south by or to the north, which would thereby encroach on the 100-foot setback. And we were told multiple times by the applicant's professional that the grade differential was such that that 100-foot is almost a arbitrary thing because it's not level land. So that would appear to meet the standard of a unique, the change in elevation / topography, grade differential, is by definition almost a unique site characteristic. Applicant has testified that the planning board suggested the encroachment be granted or requested to better suit the overall project. And there is no apparent physical or economic disability, and that as it relates to D. For 5.7.5G, G, that the solar, this is the one that, you know, kind of is the wild card, if you will. All components shall be set back the 100-foot. Within the 100-foot setback, a permanent all-season green buffer shall be planted. Green buffer shall be composed vegetation. Green buffer shall completely obscure and fence and a system and fencing from all neighboring properties. The green buffer shall be planted with mature trees such that the buffering is complete upon proposed startup. Permission to operate should not be issued until the buffer is complete. G1, and the buffer shall be maintained to provide continuous visual obstruction. Green buffer shall be trimmed, et cetera, et cetera. So that is what the ordinance is, and it would appear that in the application for G, relief sought, the solar system must be set back a minimum of 100 feet. All season green buffer must be planted within. So they're asking for relief on G. We've heard testimony that leads us, I think, to believe that if we were to grant G, and if we look at the site plan, it would appear that the south and the west are exposures onto very, significant grade differentials. So if we were to grant relief, and we've seen the pictures that were submitted as part of the application with all of the existing vegetation, but in fairness and in consideration of the abutter, it would appear that even though the applicant, see, it's kind of a catch-22 here. They're saying that they're going out of their way, and they submitted something to the planning board, but if we grant them a variance that is not qualified, then by definition, they can just rely on what's there or do what they want to do. So it would seem that if we're going to,
We'll say we could grant it with the exception of that part of the parcel which abuts resident 752 Iron Mine Hill Road.
yeah, or we could, in light of that, we could say AP Lot 16, Lot 58, right, which would be Grotto Family Trust. Did I say the name correctly? So it would be
But we're
that,
saying this in-
which appears to be the east elevation. You agree? And then we could also include the north, so we could say the north, we could grant the variance with the
To the west and the
exclusion.
south.
Yeah, to the west and the south only,
Okay.
which categorically says
Says-
that the others are not granted, if that's what we choose.
Okay.
Any conversation in that regard?
But that combines with the 100-foot variance, right? So you would have to separate the two.
Oops, sorry. All components of this shall be set back from the property line minimum of 100 feet. So we could qualify it. That still is applicable because it's applicable by the other one. Within the 100-foot minimum setback, a permanent all-season. We could qualify and say that well, for G,
From the fence to the property line.
Yeah,
and off from the fence to the
yeah,
property
for
line.
G, and this is a good distinction here, we almost missed this one. We're not granting, if we do in fact grant, we're only granting G to the north. That's not necessarily
Right.
what it says here. No, thank you. We've been staring at it and, the minutia. So, we don't have any reason to grant the 100-foot on the three other,
Well, you have the northeasterly part of the parcel that has to come down to shield their residency from this, right? Which these guys said that they would come down to shield that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
but he's talking about the 100 feet right now.
Well, no, he's talking just to do on the north, but there is a little bit of the east that gets that buffer.
well, that's that's a good question. The return, we can, counsel, we can reopen, can we reopen for clarification if we
Yeah,
want?
let's make a motion, reopen it, ask the questions.
Yeah, I
then
think,
close it
why don't
out.
we make a quick motion to reopen application, the applicant briefly for clarification?
I'll make a motion to reopen the applicant.
Second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sir, if you could come up to the podium, please.
I mean, I think he has no choice, he has to do
Oh, that's
that.
Sorry, we need a little bit of levity here. If you could, I think you can understand what we're saying. We're not necessarily inclined to grant you the 100-foot on the southerly and westerly elevations specifically, so we can put it in the variance if to grant or deny. Exactly where did the planning board recommend the encroachment or the relief?
From the north and from the residence to the east.
So if you start in the top left corner,
On your plan, you have the landscape screen, it has that specific hatch.
yep,
That is where the landscaping is proposed.
and does it return southerly?
No, it does return southerly, just for that,
Okay.
just for the stretch, and that is
Okay.
in the direction of the residence. There are no residences.
No, I
Any
understand,
other-
but therefore, there's no reason to grant relief on those elevations. But you're asking for it, so we're just gonna clarify in our variance. So if you could come forward, please? sir.
Yes.
We understand it, but just to make it emphatic, it's this defines this area here. Okay. And how do you legally define that? What are you referring to, landscape screen? All right, so if we reference, let's just get the drawing. Yeah, if we reference that the relief on G, right? Relief on D. Relief on D would be restricted to the landscape screen as noted on drawing C2 dated 7/19/22, and that would be, we can get the P later, it's buried under all my stuff. Yeah, I can find it. I had, no, our submittal number.
I think P10.
Yeah, I have it underneath, so
Yeah,
we'll
it's
add
better.
that later if we need to, or you can dig it.
It's got them all
Yeah.
folded and cracked.
So that's
P10, correct.
That's P10, okay, thank you, sir. Okay, do we have anything further for the professional, for the applicant? Hearing none, we can make a motion to close again?
Make a motion to close the applicant.
Second,
I'll second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
So, Chris, again, for clarity's sake,
We're talking about D right now, yeah?
this is D.
Okay.
So if we were to, we'll word the motion that we would grant relief.
You say D or G?
D, it is D. This is, we're only talking about the 100-foot now.
Right.
Yeah, you're talking about the green buffer.
No, just the
Okay,
100-foot.
okay, all right.
We already talked about the buffer,
All
but
right.
now we're at D.
Is
'cause
granted,
restricted to,
Restricted to landscape screen,
Landscape-
C2.
as noted
as
on
C2.
C2.
Oh, that's where the C2.
Yeah,
C2 dated 7/19/22.
Set forth
Yeah,
in
that's
Exhibit
drawing
D10.
C2.
And labeled as landscape
That's,
screen.
yeah, that's our P10.
Okay,
Yeah, that's our P10, but it's drawing number C2,
okay.
With the reference
which
of
is
landscape
site plan.
screen.
So what that does is it protects the integrity of the ordinance as it relates to the other directions on the property.
Okay.
All right, that was a good distinction. And A, well, A we've
Is a
already
special use.
achieved, that doesn't matter. So D is we're gonna leave 6.2 and 3.1 for a
Okay,
moment
those
here.
two? Was K off of that one?
Well, K, yeah, you're right. So K, because we'll do it all at the same. So
To get
we're
rid of
still
all.
on 9.3.1, but now we'll address K as it relates to 9.3.1. K, utility connections for this, they're asking, quote, utility connections for the solar system shall be installed underground on the subject property. That's what K says. Electrical transformers may be above ground if required. So it's very straightforward. They're indicating may be above ground if, so they're asking for something, again, that's redundant. It's already provided for in the ordinance. So I'm of the mind to say that we have entertained 5.7.5K and found that no relief is necessary because provisions are made or exist within the ordinance to deal with the requested relief. That's not a denial, it's a clarification or a statement on our part.
Okay.
So if we were all kind of in partial agreement as we move forward, that kind of takes K out of the discussion,
Right.
all right?
6.2.
Well, I think to not, I guess we can, we might as well.
Yeah, get them all.
Yeah. 6.2, if you guys want to go to 6.2, it's a very generic, it's in another section, so it's actually section 6.2. And again, I kind of flushed this out, if you will, in the beginning, because all due respect to any other body within this municipality, and, of course, we have great respect for the planning board. They work very hard and do a very good job, but it just seemed like this application seemed odd, that where do you stop the potpourri? Where do you stop the à la carte? Do you continue to go through the ordinance, the book, and find 3 other things that could or may happen? It just doesn't make sense to me. If we don't have 6.2, if you could read it.
Street access to buildings. Every building hereafter erected or moved shall be on a lot abutting an improved public street. All structures shall be so located on lots so as to provide safe and convenient access for servicing, public safety, and required off-street parking. On any corner lot, no driveway or access way shall be constructed within 75 feet of the intersection of 2 street lines.
It's kind of a broad, generic statement. We've already gotten testimony that there are no structures involved with this application. We know that there are 2 existing residential structures. One is the dwelling, one is a garage or an accessory building on Lot 18. We've also been told emphatically that Lot 18 only purpose is as an easement to access Lot 19, where the arrays are. So I'm steadfast in my belief that the same argument for the utility connection applies to 6.2.
I agree.
All due respect for the planning board, we don't see how it applies, and we don't know what relief we would grant.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can you look at K again, in 5.75.
Okay, back to
Yeah.
the solar ordinance?
5.75, go to K.
Yep,
So you made some reference to the transformer,
yep.
but if you read the actual section, it states utility connections, comma, electrical components. That's all. It's basically talking about the entire electrical connection, not just the transformer. So they're putting above-ground utility poles, electrical wires to get out to this array to a transformer that's gonna be on the ground. So I just wanna make sure that you understand that it's all connections, it's not just a transformer. The way K is written, I believe.
Although I think the last sentence, all electrical components of the solar photovoltaic system shall conform to all relevant applicable local, state, and national code, law, and regulations. It's not stating the above ground or below ground of that. It's just saying that it has to abide by state, local, and national codes, right?
Well, I
But
mean, I'll
they're-
read it again.
but they're-
Utility connections for the solar system shall be installed underground on subject property. Electrical transformers for utility interconnections may be above ground if required by the utility provider. All electrical components shall conform, that was the sentence that Mr. Martin just read.
But this solar array is gonna have a fairly large transformer on the ground at the property, down, located a little bit further down towards the road.
Yep.
From there, it takes off and it goes overhead through utility poles, all the way out through that easement. So I just wanna make sure when you're looking at the way that you're kind of looking at the way you're giving your relief, you're not just calling it just for the
transformers?
transformer, because this says all connections, utility connections are supposed to be underground.
Well, we're not,
I don't-
well,
I
our
don't read it
opinion
that way.
was we weren't even going to grant any relief because the ordinance is what it is. The only, they requested, quote, utility connections for solar systems shall be installed underground. Electrical transformers may be above if required by utility provider. That's all that they request. So all that is we're not granting anything because the ordinance is what it is, unless they're gonna come back with a variance request that says the power company wants to do something other than what K says, then we could rule on it, right?
Well, I just wanna make sure that when you read that,
Yep.
connections and transformers are separate. So the transformer is basically the transformer on the ground at the bottom, base of the pole near the solar array. Then it goes overhead connection, so it's a utility connection.
Yeah, but if you read it word for word, the only thing
That talks about.
that is allowed to be above ground
Is the transformer.
is the transformer.
So now you've got all
For
these overhead
utility.
lines,
Yeah.
which are gonna be overhead. They are in fact part of a connection.
But it says also, utility connections for solar shall be installed underground. So that is the lines that you're talking about.
So those lines, technically, because the way this is
Yep.
written, should be installed underground per the ordinance.
I
So
agree.
I'm just making sure when you're looking at the relief, you're looking at it correctly.
Yeah, but we're not gonna grant, and in part, this goes to the gentleman's issue. We're not granting relief because we were not told that National Grid wants to run the lines above grade, and therefore we need relief. That's not what they asked for. Right, you agree? They didn't ask for relief. So we're not tying our hands and we're not giving them anything because they haven't shown us that if the power company, the only thing that this ordinance allows the power company to do is
Transformers above ground.
transformers may be above ground. It doesn't mean that the power lines leading from the street may be above ground. It doesn't say that.
I'm just making sure it's for
No,
clarification.
you can't speak. I'm
I
sorry.
just wanted to say for the clarification, make sure that
Yep.
you're understanding the connections and the transformers. So I just
No, I
wanna make
think we
sure.
get it, but counsel, do you agree that there is nothing to be granted here because
They didn't ask.
they're only stating the obvious, which is if the power company says, then, and if it's in compliance, then they're entitled to do it.
No question about it, and if a variance is needed, then they're gonna have to address that variance.
They would have to come back.
I think you're both saying the same thing. I just think
Yeah.
that Mr. Emery's just pointing out the strict interpretation of what the ordinance says, so you don't miss it in the deliberations. Fair enough?
And it may need, that may need some better verbiage, you know? If we're ever gonna modify this thing, it may need some better
We
verbiage.
go through that forest often, don't we?
Yes, indeed. So I think with respect to the zoning official's contribution, I think it's in concert with pretty much what we were saying in that regard. And I think we've addressed it because we're not going to entertain it. We're just going to acknowledge that it was asked, and we saw no need to take action. So we finished on 6.2? I mean, it just, so now 3.13, no part of a yard or, again, this seems, the only logic involved with this is somehow linking it to the house on lot 18. And I don't understand how any of that is relevant if it's just an easement for a right-of-way. And I don't know what relief we would grant if we go to 3.1. Even if you read it verbatim, and it doesn't, I don't know what relief we would grant. If we made a categoric statement that 3.13 does not apply, we have no reason to do it because we don't know that we even have a hardship to grant a relief on. And without a hardship, we have nothing. So I think my strong recommendation is that we treat this the same way we're treating 6.2 and 5.57K.
I would agree.
Okay, anything further on that? Okay, so I think we can go back now. We're in agreement that as we write the motion, we're
Well, I was going to ask you with regard to the 3 or K 6.2 and 3.13, could we just consolidate them and say, with regard to those sections, based on what has been presented to the record and after due deliberation by the board deems that that request is not necessary
no action is required.
and no action is
Yeah,
required?
yeah. I think members would agree with that summarization, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, it's very clear that way.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll go to, again, we're on the variance approval standards. We'll go to B, 9.3.1B. That the hardship is not the result of any prior action of the applicant and does not result primarily from the desire the applicant to realize greater financial gain. I think it's clear that there's no prior action. Obviously, there is a desire to realize, you have to qualify that, greater financial gain. The variance that we're actually entertaining, which is the 5.5G and D, really, it was a function of, for the most part, D was a function of the planning board's suggestion, and I think we're inclined more times than not to defer to one of our fellow town committees that deliberates on these things on a regular basis. So I don't know that it was promoted by gain for financial gain. It was pretty much promoted by input from the planning board.
Can I just add?
Yep, go ahead.
In response to realize greater financial gain, this array was getting built as is. It was just gonna be a little farther south.
Correct.
So they're just moving it up, so they're not, in my opinion, getting a greater financial gain, because they were gonna build it anyways, just gonna be farther
Yep,
down the
yep,
property.
yep. And from everything we've been told, it benefits the town in the eyes of the planning board, and that's what we have to respect. That's right. Item C, that granting of the requested variance shall not alter the general character of the surrounding area or impair the intent or purpose of this zoning ordinance or the comprehensive plan upon which this ordinance is based. Again, when you look at just the variance requests, moving it in either direction, it could be built without the relief. It is allowed by the special permit use. It's undeveloped land. If the extent of the variance request, steep terrain, would not alter the general characteristics. The second relates to the lot lines exposed to the current vacant lots. And like we said, that, the general character, it's vacant land, it's allowed, so it's kind of a very subjective interpretation. And we've gone out of our way to qualify both G and D to protect the other exposures in the best interest of the abutters and the property owners that we don't know of. And as noted, as Mr. Martin noted, the array could be built without the variance tomorrow without any issue, because once the special use permit was approved, it could be built. So I don't think, and the comprehensive plan clearly provides for this type of construction because it is an approved use subject to a special use permit. Item D, that the relief granted is the least relief necessary. That clearly appears to be the case. And again, D was a function of the planning board, G was a function of the applicant. Item E, granting the variance request will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other land structures or buildings in the same district. And again, the odd thing about that is this is a variance and a special use permit for solar. So if an abutting property wanted to put solar and they were compliant, then they needed a variance. Then so it's unique in that regard, in that special privilege is almost always a function of a variance. But it's a special privilege that's unique to two very specific things, which is a recommendation to push the array in a southerly direction and a modification to allow for existing plantings to leave as existing. So I don't think that there's anything there that confers a specific special privilege. 9.3.2A we know doesn't apply because that pertains to a use variance. B, that in granting a dimensional variance, that the hardship that will be suffered by the owner of the subject property if the dimensional variance is not granted shall amount to more than a mere inconvenience. We have stricken the following sentence. The fact that the next sentence, so this is the one after that, the fact that use may be more profitable or that a structure may be more valuable after relief is granted shall not be grounds for relief. The hardship is a mere inconvenience in the strictest definition, but again, since the applicant has testified that the planning board has suggested it, there is no compelling reason, it appears that, to me, that the board wouldn't grant it because it doesn't have any detrimental impact. So that's that. My other notes were on K and the other ones, and I think we flushed that out. So we can go back. If anybody wants to add anything to any of those subsections that I discussed. But again, it has to be relevant to the information we have. Vinny, you have something? No? Anybody?
No.
Okay. So what we should do is, before we close deliberations, let's make sure that, Chris, you have a handle. You just repeated it quite eloquently and clearly.
Right.
So
The only thing that I'm unclear to get in with regard to the restriction on the landscaping screen, that only applies to D and not G?
no, it applies to G and not D.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, because D only deals with dimension.
Okay,
And
I
G,
got it.
yeah, okay.
Okay, I got it. All right, so,
So I think, well, we can close deliberation because the motion, we can discuss the motion as it's being made. So if members are good,
I'll make a motion to close deliberations.
second,
I'll second it.
second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so, and again, for the public's knowledge and information, we always make motions in the affirmative. Just because we make it in the affirmative doesn't mean that we're going to vote in the affirmative, but that's just the way we started. So, Chris, if you may.
sure. I make a motion that we approve that part of the application of Island Cylinder, ZBR 23-04, dated December 30th, 2022, seeking a dimensional variances under section 5.7D, and said motion is restricted, that said relief is restricted to landscape screen set forth on drawing C2 in Exhibit P10 dated July 19th, 2022.
If we could just go back,
Yeah,
just double check.
I thought you said A.
Yeah,
Did you say A?
it should be 5.7.5D
yes.
is the northerly 100-foot relief. But actually, we should check that. Do we have the actual dimension, or what we can do is reference the drawing, okay?
This drawing.
Does it actually
This one
show
doesn't have
the degree of the relief?
Yeah, I think there is one in there.
Okay. Well, but this is accurate. So we will say, otherwise I have to reopen testimony and all this again. Just give me a hand signal, or just send me a note. Tell me what the relief is, please, without me having to open the conversation. Otherwise, we can just record this drawing, because this is a legal document, so,
I think it was 40 feet.
yeah, that's what I was curious.
Oh, just say,
Okay, thank you, sir. Can you just take that? So that's on, this is on one of the drawings, so it's S.
Yeah, but it should be,
Yeah.
you're looking for the
Yeah,
distances
but
here.
here's the summary of the table, so. And so what we can say, if he's not able to specifically find it, is we're referencing again the.
drawing
the-
C2.
Yeah,
Uh,
the
in-
drawing,
in
yeah,
Exhibit
the
P10.
setback shown on that drawing as the relief.
50 feet,
Is it 50?
yeah.
50, 50?
It's only shown on SO1.
Yeah,
Okay.
50 feet.
All right, so
That's the proposed.
I'll say it
50
this
feet.
way, that,
But the visual buffer, he's in the visual buffer, visual buffer's only 50 feet. You have to be 100 feet. He's asking for.
Solar setback is 100, so he's asking for 50.
Yeah, but the point is that it's not that, because you have that 100 feet, that you need 100 feet of buffer, you only need 50 feet of buffer. So he's still gonna have his 50 foot of buffer. He's just not gonna have 100 feet from his property line.
Well, no, but the ordinance says 100 feet, so all we're asking for is what is the relief? So you're asking for 50 feet of relief.
That's right, for the,
So the relief from 5.7.5D is 50 feet. And you can reference, again, P10. Yeah,
P10,
drawing S01, which is our P10. We might as well get it to the letter, since this is so.
all right, this is probably the hardest one.
And then, just, thank you, sir. And 5.7.5G, that's the one that we qualified so that the relief was only granted on the southerly and westerly elevations, or property lines. You agree?
Yes,
Okay. And I think, because I think that's it, so I think you have it right if you just want to reread it.
okay. All right, I make a motion to approve that part of the application of Islander Solar, application number ZBR 23-04, seeking a dimensional variance, setback of variance from 100 feet to 50 feet as prescribed in section 5.7.5D, providing
No, that's complete, and then you move to G.
Right. A variance from section 5.7.5G. The solar systems must be set back a minimum of 100 feet, and all seasons screen buffer must be planted within. Said relief is granted to the southern and western boundaries only. And that part of the application seeking relief under section 5.75K, section 6.2, and section 3.13, after reviewing the record and due consideration by the board, no action is required.
Oh, one omission, I think we didn't include the landscape screen, remember?
Oh,
We are
so
gonna.
as a regard to, oh, okay,
Yeah,
so I'll just add it. So
Yeah.
as, with regard to the relief sought from section 5.7.5G.
Correct. Relief is restricted, well, no,
That the plantings will be.
oh,
laid out.
everything but. It was all elevations but.
Right.
Yeah. We were granting, you could.
We granted it on the southerly
And the westerly.
Right.
And most of the easterly, but.
So
north and
we
east.
can leave it that way, which would make the whole easterly applicable, or we did ask the engineer, you remember,
Yeah,
he
reference to landscape.
he referenced
screening.
this little return, and we referenced the landscaping screen.
Yeah,
Is that the same?
on C2, when you mentioned
Remember
C2.
you-
Well, that's why I was asking whether
Yeah.
it also
So
applied to
what we're
D or
actually
G.
granting relief on for G was only,
All west, all south,
yeah,
and part of east.
except,
and
yeah,
part of east.
yeah, yeah.
Everything that's not labeled as landscape screen on C2.
Yeah, yeah. So the relief was only for, yeah.
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 Everything that's not listed as landscape screen. on
Correct,
C2.
yeah, yeah. Because that's the area that must comply.
I'm having trouble getting it together.
Okay, well,
So we're,
to simplify it, I mean,
Regents-
we could
Regent
say
pieces
all
C2?
of the easterly, but in
I don't wanna
fairness,
do that,
in
'cause
fairness
then-
to the, yeah,
I think you referenced C2 and
yeah.
everything that's not listed as landscape screen.
Okay, so I'll do this, basically the same thing that I did for D then.
Do it the opposite, do it in the negative, meaning we are granting the relief requested from G with the exception of the landscape screen area as
Okay.
noted on C2, which is our P10
Okay.
dated.
719.
Yeah, that may be easier
All right,
to
so
understand.
with regard to that part of the application which seeks relief from 5.7.5G, said relief is granted with the exception of the landscape screen as set forth on drawing C2 and exhibit P10 dated 7/19/22.
Only thing I would add is landscape
He did.
screen,
He said it.
no,
He said it.
area, landscape screen area.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
add that word area.
All right, so with regard to the relief sought in section 5.7.5G, said relief is granted.
Yeah, with the
lost it.
exception of,
With the exception of the land screen area,
yeah, noted on,
as reflected
yep,
on drawing C2 of exhibit P10 dated 7/19/22.
correct,
All right,
wunderbar.
thank God. So,
Do we need to read it again, or do we got it? Do we still have a second? All right, if we have we had a
I'll
second,
second,
right?
I'll second.
We had a second. Mr. Martin seconds. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Najarian?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes?
Mr. Marcantonio? Mr. Marston?
Yes.
No, he wasn't here for the first one.
I can't, right.
So we have every eligible member has voted.
That's correct.
And the vote is 3-1. Okay. Best of luck with your project, and mitigate things for your purposes. Hopefully it all works out. Yeah, we'll take just one moment, folks, and we'll get your application. It's just
Is there a water fountain
housekeeping.
around here somewhere? I really need a drink of water.
Larry,
Yeah, but it's just a, like, automated,
Do you want me to go to my car? I have a bottle of water that I
oh, yeah, if you, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'll be right back. Give me a moment, I'll get you a bottle of water.
Oh, my God.
I'll be right back.
Back to order. We'll try to expedite things as best we can. We appreciate your patience. So item 8C is ZBR 2301, application for dimensional variance, Andrew and Amber Lozati, 120 Andrew Street, Woonsocket, lot AP08, lot 39. It's a non-conforming lot of record. Lot does not have any frontage along a public road. The applicant is seeking relief from section 4.2 of the zoning ordinance, which requires a dimensional variance. This is a lot in an RA 65 district. Applicant would be constructing a single-family residence. Again, this had been continued to this date from its initial presentation. So we had gone over quite a bit of the stuff, and I believe we had asked National Survey to, our issue was to make sure that we had a clear easement. I don't know if members got it, but National Survey emailed over to the zoning official today an updated document, which is a combination of the easement, which we had called, the easement was, the P2 was the warranty deed. The easement was P3. So, again, just identify yourself for the secretary.
My name is Norbert Therian. I'm a professional land surveyor registered in the state of Rhode Island.
So, Ms. Therian, if you could, the new document, the easement that was submitted today, does that differ from what we're calling P3? It looks to be the identical thing, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The main instructions that we had received from the board a couple of weeks ago when we were last here was to modify the existing plan, which is a boundary survey that we performed on site, and embellish it with regards to the easements that are applicable to this particular piece of property. We had forwarded previously the documents, the deed descriptions going back to 100+ years, indicating that there was an easement and access to this particular piece of property now from Brentwood Drive, which is the public roadway, but initially way back when to Woonsocket Hill Road. So what I did do is indicate on that plan and make back references to deed books and pages that describes historically the existing cart path having the ability to be used to access to a public road for this particular lot, which is AP8, lot 39, plus more recently in deed book 889, page 34, another 20-foot easement was created just for convenience from Brentwood Drive, which is a public roadway, to this particular piece of property. And the current deed, which is 893, page 211, which is for Amber and Andrew Lezat, the applicants who are here this evening, their deed makes reference and back references that deed description going through the abutting lot, which is owned by the applicant's father.
So, Ms. Therian, just to clarify for the record, part of the submittal that you made today, we're going to identify it as P8A, okay? That is your existing conditions map or plan, and the only change it appears that you made was to tie the ownership of Lot 39 changed to it's listed as Andrew Lezat, and previously, I think it was not the same family member, it was somebody else, it was a Carrie, yeah. So that's the only change on?
No, I also drew on there the easements in the 20-foot right-of-way.
Okay.
As well as I embellished the easement that follows the existing cart path, and also indicated the deed book and page as to where that historically came from, way back in 1862, I believe. And that it follows, if you read all the deeds, I know we gave you an awful lot of deeds before, but if you historically look at the deeds, there's back references to a previous deed. And if you keep on going, that easement carries through.
Okay, and for members' benefit, I did consult with the zoning official. He was in communication with the applicant's lawyer, who was not able to attend today. And it's the zoning official's a clear opinion that he is satisfied that the easement is duly recorded, everybody is in agreement, it is a legal document. You know, we had asked that this drawing be cleaned up, for lack of a better word.
Right.
But as a member, I'm satisfied that with the zoning official's professional opinion, everything has been recorded. You've clearly testified to that. So I think the primary issue the board had has now been addressed, which is there is a valid legal easement that would grant lot one, grant 39 access.
Correct.
To Brentwood Drive.
Correct.
Okay, so I think we're good in that regard, unless you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I wanted to ask the zoning officer, was there Mr. Lloyd Garapi, who wasn't able to attend tonight because of COVID, did he forward to us any correspondence or the board correspondence? And if in turn he did, would it be appropriate to have that read in as another document that accompanies the application?
Well, I did receive a letter from Mr. Garapi, but unfortunately, I think just before he went home for the day, there was some discussion possibly between the applicant and Mr. Garapi that they were going to actually continue this.
Okay.
And I think he put that into his letter, so I just didn't want to confuse any entrance into that by putting his letter in there where it says to move it when we decided last minute at the end of today to move forward. So I didn't want to get it confused in the record, and that's why I didn't want to put that letter in there. But it does clearly state that
Well, I just want to have it for the records that if in turn, because there was some concern as to whether or not I was interpreting some of the documentation that we had supplied correctly, and if in fact Mr. Garapi, Attorney Garapi, has an opinion or stated an opinion, I just want to make sure that that's in there to help the board solidify its opinions.
So basically, it said that I represented the Lizards with respect to the purchase of property and had Stewart Title Insurance Company, a national title insurer, issue an owner's title policy which recognized the existence of the so-called cart path without raising any objection to it. I understand that my presence was requested, but unfortunately he was ill and couldn't come.
Okay.
So it basically states that a title company has in fact looked at it. They feel the same thing that you do in saying that that cart path easement does in fact show it to be there, and it has been there, you know, for quite some time. So there wasn't a lot of question to that.
I think in respect to the issue of submitting that document as evidence with the note that they're requesting a continuance was actually done in the benefit of the applicant. So I think board members can rely on the testimony that the zoning official gave. That document will be in his official record. So I personally am satisfied that the legal statute threshold has been crossed and that we're good.
I just didn't have an opportunity to see that document. I've spoken to Mr. Garapi many times, as you can well imagine, and he said he was going to state his opinion as to the title, because the gentleman's not here, but there was a board member last time that said something about a title search report. So I just wanted to make sure that if there was that statement, I'm glad Mr. Garapi used that phrase, that everything is acceptable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Do we have any questions for this, Mr. Norbert?
I have a question.
Mr. Therian, I'm sorry.
So, where is the proposed driveway? There are two easements, right? The cart path and then one granted by the Lazat family owning lot 144.
Correct. Yeah, this piece of property actually has two easements. There was the historic one, but due to the fact that that one, they weren't too sure if they were gonna use that, but in hindsight, they think they're gonna be using that one because of easier access straight down through Brentwood Drive, rather than having to have a couple of relatively sharp bends. We have the ability to use both. So far, they're finding it easier to use the historic one, which is the existing cart path, which is probably a good idea too, because then we're gonna use the existing
No,
cart
it's
path
not this one.
and minimize the overall disturbance. Because again, typically when you're building, in essence, what you see now from the street is what you're going to see when everything is all said and done, because the proposed disturbance way up at the top of the hill is 450 feet away.
I hate to ask a question, but I'm just curious, we don't have to belabor it, but that Robatali, lot 186, do they not in fact have legal access to the easement all the way down?
No,
Okay.
no, it's only, there were two parties that were involved in 1862. One was the owner of Lot 39, which were the Maoris, and I'd forgotten already, but the other piece, which has now been subdivided with Woonsocket Hill Estates.
Okay, so I think we're good in that regard.
So the easement will be parallel to the stone wall?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
And it still does cross over lot 40, right? And that's still a legal application, where at the very bottom right corner?
That's correct.
Yeah, all right. So, and that's all, is lot 40 undeveloped, or is there a house on that?
That's undeveloped.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, do we have any other questions for the surveyor? Hearing none, we can, I don't think we need to hear from the applicant, but you're free to speak if you like. We heard your testimony, okay. So we can close the applicant. Is there a member of the public that wishes to speak? You're the only one here, so if it's not you, then it's no one. Okay, so we can close both if we have a motion.
I'll make a motion to close the public.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
I'll
we'll
make a
move on.
motion to close the applicant.
Oh, you did both, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go
Make
ahead.
a motion to close the applicant.
Second?
Close the applicant.
Yeah,
Second.
yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the variance approval standards, 9.3. Again, 9.3.1A, this regard to the hardship, seeks relief due to the unique characteristics of the subject land or structure, and not to the general characteristics surrounding area, and is not due to a physical or economic disability. Clearly, we know that it's been clearly defined that the property is pre-existing non-conforming and was created, I don't know how or why, but without any frontage. This would clearly seem to meet the definition of unique characteristics of subject land. There is no economic or physical disability. That the hardship is not the result of any prior action of the applicant. It does not result primarily from the desire of the applicant to realize greater financial gain. Clearly, there was no prior action, and the word greater gain, the applicant is only trying to construct a residential dwelling on the property for which it's zoned. So I don't see how there could be greater gain, it's just the use. Item C, that granting the requested variance will not alter the general character of the surrounding area or impair the intent or purpose of this zoning ordinance or the comprehensive plan upon which it is based. We know from just driving that neighborhood that there obviously it's all residential in that section of Brentwood and Woonsocket Hill Road. Certainly there doesn't appear to be anything in the comp plan that would not want a duly defined residential property to be used for residential purposes. And of course, we've always been of the mind to try to clean up nonconformities whenever we can. Item D, that the relief to be granted is the least relief necessary. Well, least relief is kind of a contradiction because there is nothing. So we're granting 100 because we're not granting 100, well, we are, we're granting whatever the easement is, but you have no choice because there's nothing there. So by definition, the easement that allows for a driveway, which would seem to meet the threshold of least relief. E, granting the variance request will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other land structures or buildings. Given the lack of frontage, the relief if granted would probably confer upon the applicant the same privileges that is already existing to other lands or structures in the same district, so it's the opposite probably. 9.3.2A, granting a use, that doesn't apply. 9.3.2B, granting dimensional variance that the hardship would be will be suffered by the owner of the subject property if the dimensional variance is not granted shall amount to more than a mere inconvenience. Fact that use may be more profitable or that a structure may be valuable after the relief is granted shall not be grounds for relief. Clearly, this defines the word, the phrase, more than a mere inconvenience. Without the relief, there is no access to the property, and it's residentially zoned, and it cannot be built on. So it certainly crosses the threshold to a far greater than a mere inconvenience. That's what I have. Any members to add to that?
No, the only piece I'd add to the B for the greater financial gain, the applicant stated that they're planning on building a house and living in it themselves, so, you know, if it was a builder trying to build it, you know, you might be able to say it's for greater financial gain, but being that they're building the house for themselves, you know.
With an in-law,
Yeah.
Yep, okay, yep, good point. Anyone else, anything further to add to the criteria or the discussion? Okay, hearing none, can we have a motion to approve for the relief
my
requested?
first attempt at this, so let me
Okay.
give it a shot.
Sure.
Motion to approve application ZBR 2301 dated January 10th, 2023 for a variance of lot AP8, lot 39, owned by Andrew and Amber Lazat, reference exhibit P8A, which is the map plan, for an easement via AP8 lot 144 owned by Robert and Deborah Lazat, and lot 40 owned by Leroy B. and Claire Blackmer, which would result in a valid legal easement of lot 39 to Brentwood Drive.
I think you need to reference the section 4.2 in there for non-conforming lot of record.
Yeah,
Reference,
So they're asking for relief from section 4.2,
Oh.
non-conforming lot of record?
relief from section 4.2.
Yep.
yeah, which is non-conforming, yeah,
Lot of record.
frontage, yeah.
Okay.
Council, do we need,
I think we need
the easement is the grants, there is no frontage, so did we word this properly?
What I heard just read, I had no issues with.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I think it was concise and clear, and
That's your
members,
inference, Vinnie.
members need to hear it again? Did you fit in the 4.4 or 4.2?
Oh, you want me to do it again?
No, did you fit that in the 4.2?
Yes, I will fit that in.
Okay.
And then I type this up and send it?
Well, you can talk to Tiffany as to
Okay.
how she wants it presented.
Okay.
So, do we need it read again, or
I'll
members are
second it.
good? We have a second? Okay.
I'll second.
We good? Do we need it read?
Oh,
written?
I can't vote on this, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Well, she'll call the roll.
Yeah.
Okay, so we close, we have a motion. That's him.
Can he make the motion? If he's not a voter, he can make the
That's
Oh,
motion?
he's a member, he can make a motion. Yeah, he can make a motion, he just can't vote on it, that's all. It's not an issue. Okay, so we have a roll call vote?
Mr. Najarian?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Marcantonio? Ms. Benoit?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you
Best of
so
luck.
much.
Good luck.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Have a good night.
Motion I've ever, I've been on the board 11 years. That was by far the most complicated one. Oh my God. It's a good thing he was able to hold together. That wasn't right, that one.
I put him over the edge.
Oh my.